The President today received a report of the Presidential Panel on the Reform of the Special Anti-Robbery Squad, SARS. Part of the recommendation of the committee is the establishment of state and local government police. Upon receipt of the 2,804-page report, which contained other recommendations, such as a dismissal of 37 police officers from the force, amongst others, the President directed the National Human Rights Commission, the Inspector General of Police, and the Ministry of Justice to work out modalities for its full implementation. Our correspondent, Gloria Muzuki, reports.
President Muhammadu Buhari just back from his first official assignment in Saudi Arabia since his inauguration on May 29. He is receiving members of the Presidential Panel on the Reform of the Special Anti-Robbery Squad, SARS. The panel, constituted in 2018 following allegations of human rights violations perpetrated by officers of SARS, has come to submit its report after 10 months.
The panel recommended 37 police officers for dismissal from the force. 24 were recommended for prosecution. The panel also directed the Inspector General of Police to unravel the identity of 22 officers involved in the violation of human rights of innocent citizens, remaining the Special Anti-Robbery Squad to Anti-Robbery Section, ARS, which was its original name, and to make the section operate under the intelligence arm of the police.
Other recommendations of the panel include establishment of state and local government police, significant improvement in the funding, kitting and facilities of the Nigeria Police Force, strengthening of the police information technology and police rapid response complaint unit, as well as ensure that the anti-robbery section limits itself to tackling armed robbery, among others. The Presidential Panel received 113 complaints across Nigeria, investigated them before arriving at these recommendations.
The police was also directed to pay compensation of various sums to 45 complainants and tender apologies in 5 complaints and directed to obey court orders in 5 of the matters. The police was also directed to immediately arrest and prosecute 2 retired senior police officers found to have violated the rights of citizens, one for extrajudicial killing and the other for illegal takeover of property of a suspect.
President Muhammadu Buhari then expressly gives a directive.
And hereby direct that since the recommendations of the commission that constituted the panel are enforceable as decisions of the court, that the Inspector General of Police and the Solicitor General of the Federation, Permanent Secretary, Federal Ministry of Justice, meet with the Commission to work out the modalities for the implementation of the report within 3 months from today.
The President is confident that the recommendations will go a long way in redressing widespread grievances and ensure accountability on the part of police officers. From the Presidential Villa, Gloria Umezuke, Channels Television News.
To examine the recommendation of state and local government police, I'm being joined at the news at 10 now, live from our Abuja studios by a legal practitioner, Mr. Ben Wosu. Mr. Wosu, thank you for joining us on the news at 10.
Thank you.
What is your take on the steps being taken by the federal government to address the excesses of the Special Anti-Robbery Squad that have attracted a lot of criticism from Nigerians?
Well, first of all, you have to note the purpose for which that arm of the security agencies was established. It is merely to fight armed robbery and not other crimes. And therefore, I believe that the training given to the officers is slightly different to balance with the terror of armed robbery. You notice that the complaints of the Nigerian populace has been that some of them have left that ambit of their creation and gone into areas that is normally done by normal police officers. And the training manifests in the way they handle human beings, completely devoid of their rights and decency. the complaints have been based on excessive use of force, sometimes maiming and killing suspects and those under detention and arrest. That has been the main thing. Therefore, I suppose that the complaints by Nigerians is justified, and the excessive force that they use should, as it is now being looked into, be thoroughly examined. One other aspect of it is that it is nauseating when someone is a police officer and is not in uniform. Sometimes when you're on the highway and you run into them, you don't know whether they're armed robbers, you don't know whether they are police, you don't know whether they are any sort of security arm of the federal government recognized by law. That, I think, also should go into the major concerns of the police reform. You see a police officer in slippers, sometimes in jacquard, sometimes in abada, sometimes in abada. You don't know whether the person, and he's with an AK-47 in a public place. It's shocking. Sometimes you don't know whether to get out of your car and run for your life.
So do you think that establishing, Mr. Nwosu, do you think that establishing state and local government police will help to check these excesses if the recommendation is approved by the president?
I will seriously recommend that the president approve it expeditiously, because it takes, you see, when you send, for purposes of our argument, an Igbo police officer, you send him to Maduguri. He doesn't understand the language, doesn't understand the ways and means the people move around, and you intend for him to stop criminal activities there. It takes donkey years. I do believe that the time for state police is now. We are under-policed, and the rate of crime is rising every day. And the spate of killings is unprecedented in the history of Nigeria. Some attribute it to poverty, deprivation, frustration, unemployment, or whatever and whatnot. But the truth of the matter is that I strongly believe that local police at the local government level, at the state level, will be more efficient, even if it is just for merely surveillance purposes, intelligence gathering, and then giving it to the federal officers. It will be much more efficient.
But
in the villages, everybody knows who is a criminal. Everybody knows who is not a criminal. And it will be quite easier to take it off from there to the state level, and then from the state level to the federal level. And it will also provide a lot of employment opportunities. My only take is that as much as possible, let almost 90% or more of the officers be university graduates, so that will be easy. They will have some intelligence to pass on. And the future of policing is not really about guns.
Training, Mr. Nwosu, is very important, as you rightly mentioned. Of course, they should have some background with education as high as possible. But the recruitment of police officers, there will have to be that. If you're establishing state and local government police, then what happens when you run into the same problems you're trying to run away from, which is police abusing, their own powers, their authorities? Because that will most likely come up when you also have state and local government police.
I think that the fear is unfounded, with profound respect. You see, we in the villages at the local government levels, we know who is who. If a criminal is nominated, there will be mass protest about that criminal. Everybody knows who is a good person, everybody knows who is a bad person. And we know, everybody knows the families that have decent people, churches, traditional rulers. The only thing I want to see as a clear and present danger is the influence of politicians and the influence of the elite in the choice of who becomes a police officer at the local government level or at the state level. If there is minimal interference, I can assure you that 90% of those that will be chosen will do a good job of this, of policing our communities, because we are in danger. And the sooner we get these things sorted out, the better for everybody.
Well, your thoughts and your opinion. highly valuable here on the News at 10, and we do hope authorities are listening, and we do hope for the best for our police force here in Nigeria. Thank you again, Mr. Wosu. The legal matters now. The Federal High Court sitting in Lagos has sentenced Mr. Callistus Obi, a convicted former acting Director General of the Nigerian Maritime Administration and Safety Agency, to 7 years in prison, but with an option of 40 million naira fine. The EFCC had arraigned Mr. Obi and Ali Dismas, who was a personal assistant to Mr. Obi's predecessor, Mr. Patrick Akpobolokemi, on April 12, 2016, on 8 counts of conspiracy, conversion, and laundering of over 100 million naira from Nimasa. Justice Olatoregun, however, acquitted and discharged them on the count bordering on conspiracy, but convicted them for conversion and money laundering. At today's proceedings, the court sentenced the 2 defendants, while the former acting DG got a 7-year jail term with an option of paying a 42 million naira fine. A second convict, Ali Dismas, got a 7-year jail term with an option of 21 million naira fine for the 3 counts on which he was convicted. In her sentence, Justice Olatoregun noted that though the punishment section was silent on the issue of fines, she held that the court had the discretion to award same. While the sentence is to run concurrently, the fines are cumulative. Justice Olatoregun also refused to order the forfeiture to the federal government of a hotel in Asaba, which is owned by the first defendant.
Very closer look at the judgment and see whether there's a possibility of testing it on appeal, because my view, though, I believe that if you look at Section 15(3) of the Money Laundering Prohibition Act, it clearly states that the court shall, upon conviction, sentence the defendants to not less than 7 years imprisonment and not exceeding 14 years without providing for an option of fine.
A legal action seeking to stop the majority Speaker of the House of Representatives, Mr. Femi Gbajabiamila, from contesting the speakership of the House at the 9th National Assembly has been adjourned to June 7th for mention. Justice Ian Ekwo adjourned the suit to Friday following the inability of the plaintiff in the suit, Mr. Philip Ondie, to serve the court process on the lawmaker as required by law. Mr. Ondie had approached the Federal High Court praying for an order of the court to restrain Mr. Gbajabiamila from presenting himself for the election of the Speaker of the House of Representatives. The grounds of the plaintiff is that the lawmaker was once convicted by the Supreme Court of the United States of America on alleged fraudulent practices. By the alleged conviction of Mr. Gbajabiamila, the plaintiff claimed that he is no longer qualified and eligible for the House of Representatives as well as the speakership of the House. However, when the matter came up in court, Representative Gbajabiamila was not in court and was not represented by any legal practitioner. Counsel to Mr. Ondie, Mr. Ayodele Justice, informed the court that he has not been able to serve the court process on the lawmaker. Justice Ekwo says the court action by its nature is of public interest and must be accorded speedy hearing, and in the since May 21st, when the suit was filed, the plaintiff ought to have made good efforts to serve the lawmaker with the court processes.